Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Really excited for today's show, folks. We have an old friend with us today. We're going to get into some great stories today about his life, his experiences. And I'll tell you, I said it yesterday, and I stand by it. One of the best storytellers I think I've ever met in the paranormal, because he has such rich stories and because he's had a rich history. So I want to get to his particulars and then get him in right away. John Russell is joining us today. He's a professional psychic and been one for over 50 years, internationally known for and maintaining a worldwide clientele. He's provided psychic readings for clients in over 40 countries. He's been a paranormal researcher and investigator for over 50 years, beginning serious study and investigations at age 11. During his lifetime, John has experienced thousands of physical supernatural manifestations. In addition, he's a UFO experiencer with multiple encounters. We'll talk about one of those today, including interactions with crafts and their associated paranormal phenomena. John filmed a TV pilot for the History Channel in which he psychically explored the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. The accuracy of John's psychic insights during his investigations were verified both by the docents at the historic sites he explored as well as by the production team. And he also simulated a variety of paranormal activity, some of which he captured on film, or which was captured on film. For over 18 years, he's been a popular featured guest, heard worldwide on over 100 different radio shows and podcasts, including multiple appearances on 13 different United Kingdom podcasts. In 4 years, John has been interviewed over 190 times, including 12 interviews on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, 11 different appearances on Paranormal Reality TV with J.V. Johnson, 9 different appearances with Christina Gomez, 5 appearances on Fate Magazine Radio. He's been on with Fade to Black with Jimmy Church and many, many more. In addition to being an ordained minister and having served as the assistant pastor of a church over the decades, John has studied, investigated, and practiced an abundance of psychic paranormal disciplines, including earning the degree of Certified Tarot, T-A-R-O-T Master. I have to ask him why that's abbreviated like that. He is experienced in psychometry, clairvoyance or remote viewing, seance, telekinesis, crystal ball gazing, Ouija boards, ghosts, hauntings, ESP, paranormal investigations, UFOs, mediumship, tarot readings, healing and remote healing, utilizing crystals, stones, runes, pendulums, dowsing rods, and many, many other aspects of the psychic, occult, spiritual, religious, and paranormal realms. I tell you what, John's got a new book out there. We're going to talk about it today. The Crying Tree and the Magic Rock. It came out in October of last year. It's my fault, folks, the reason why John hasn't been here sooner to talk about it. But let's bring him in right now, ladies and gentlemen. Back on Darkness Radio, John Russell. My friend, welcome back.
Hey, Tim, it's so good to be back with you, man. We always have such a good conversation. I'm looking forward to today's and appreciate all the listeners. And we're going to have a blast. We're going to have fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always look forward to having you on the show and being able to just chop it up with you. So, you know, reading through the book, John, I was highly entertained. I got to tell you, first of all, you know how to spin a yarn. I'll give you that right off the bat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Second of all, so I mentioned this yesterday on the show. When you first sent me the book, I looked at the title of the book and I almost wrote back to you and said, "Is this a children's book?" Because the name of the book threw me, right?
Right.
But then you get into the book and you realize why it's titled that. I mean, sometimes people say, well, just be literal about what the subject is that you're writing about, right? Just tell people what you're writing about.
Right.
But then I was like, oh, and pardon my language here, John. I was like, oh, no shit, really? So I guess, okay. And so, you know, for a moment, and there's times where, you know, you almost have to step outside of yourself and go, you can never say never in this field, right?
Exactly.
You can never say never. And we all have these experiences in the paranormal where you go, did I really just see that? Did I really just feel that? Did that actually just happen to me? This is one of those books where you go, Wow, did that really just happen to him? And
Yeah.
how does
Yeah.
he know that happened to him?
Right.
Now, that's one of the questions I guess I have to ask you throughout the years as you had some of these experiences. Now, you did have some people in some of these experiences, you had somebody there that could verify it.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
in some of these experiences, you were by yourself. And how were you able to within yourself be sure?
Well, I've had these experiences since I was age 5. And when they started at age 5, the adults around me and sometimes other kids around me witnessed these as well. So that gave me the baseline to go, okay, if I'm experiencing this, if I'm seeing this, if I'm feeling this, and other people are too, then I've got a baseline there that I can measure things from, that I can refer to.
Mm-hmm.
So it became a matter of, okay, I'm seeing this. This is something that I've seen that's similar to something that I've experienced before or seen before when I had witnesses also verify it. So therefore, I'm experiencing the same thing again. It has the same validity. And then when you've had way over 1,000, maybe thousands by now of these physical manifestations, you get to, it's like you learn to discern anything else. How do you call a ball from a strike?
Right.
And it becomes a matter of experience. It becomes a matter of learning. It becomes a matter of knowing. And as an aside here, I'll tell you something funny.
Sure.
The people say, how do you know you've had this many experiences? What, did you count them? Did you write them down? I did. I began to
Really?
keep a log of all the experiences that I had, and I wrote them down in longhand on paper, sheet after sheet, tablet after tablet, tablet after tablet, and then finally started transferring things to a computer and keeping them on the computer on a word processing program. So yeah, I did. It was really funny because there was a couple of guys. They do an online talk show that basically finds paranormal interviews and then makes fun of them. And I stumbled across mine one day. They took one of my coast to coast interviews and they were just tearing it apart and just laughing and this and the other. And that's what one of the guys said was referencing the number of experiences I've had. And he said, now, how does this guy know this? What, does he count them? Does he write them down? Oh, there comes another one. Let me write that down. And it was so funny because that's exactly what I do. That's how I kept track of things over the years. So, but it is that process of knowing. It's like I say, it's something that when you experience, and so many of these things are not just a vision or a sensation. Most of these things have been physical occurrences. Like I'll give you one example.
Mm-hmm.
I have where I write, where my computer is, and where my microphone and camera is, where I'm talking to you here. It's the computer I do my writing on, and then I have another desk in my office that I do my readings, do some other things, I work on and stuff. So they're across the room from each other. And I had a stack of quarters sitting over there on the other desk, and they were perfectly balanced, all in a single column and not a real tall stack. And I moved from that desk and came over here, and I heard this metallic sliding noise and then a plop. And I was like, what in the world? And I turned around and looked, and one of the quarters had slid off the top and landed right next to the stack. And I said, oh, okay, hi, guys. And I turned back around, went back to my work, plop, and turned back around. And this other quarter had slid off and landed exactly perfectly on top of the first one next to the stack. Turned around and went back to work, plop, another third quarter slid off, landed perfectly, just like somebody had stacked it on top of that other stack. So, and I always talk to the guys, hey, do you have any particular message, or you just let me know you're here or whatever, because sometimes the spirits just like to pal around. They just like us to know they're there. They just like our company. So when you have concrete physical experiences like that, you don't need a third reference point or a second reference point or anything. It's reality. It's happening. It's real. It's there. And like I say, I've had way over thousands of these things since I was a kid. And what's real and what isn't. When something occurs on the physical realm and you're a witness to that, you have enough, capability to say, okay, here's something occurring from the paranormal realm affecting this physical realm, and I got to witness it.
Now, I noticed something, not just from our discussions here and the different books I've read of yours, but a lot of times you'll just say it's the guys from the other realm or the guys from the other
Right.
side.
Right.
It's almost like if it's something harmless enough, you don't necessarily need to check to see who it is for
Right.
your benefit. It's almost like, yeah, if it's harmless, if it's pranky enough,
Yeah.
it's just the guys. It's like you're hanging
yeah.
out. It's just the
Yeah.
guys. You don't need to pin somebody. You don't need an identity. You don't need to.
Exactly.
Why is that? Is it just? Are you kind of a live and let live type of guy that you don't need to pin a name to it?
Well, I don't. It's like I've had a retinue of spirits around me since I was a kid, and some of those spirits have been with me for my entire life. Some have come and gone, some new ones have come, but for the most part, there's been this core. I call them my guys. The guys, I refer to them as the guys on the other side, and to me, that terminology saying the guys, they're like my spiritual family. I just say, hey, the guys, and it's this retinue of spirits that's been with me all the time. They've protected me. They have literally, physically saved my life on many occasions. They've given me guidance. They've given me comfort. They've given me healing. They've given me all this insight and all these wonderful opportunities in the spiritual realm. And so it's just a very loving, hey, guys, and I don't need to point out or know if it's this particular one or if it's, this one or that one or whatever.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, and this is something that I've dealt with clients over the years, everybody wants to know who's with me and what are their names.
Yeah.
And it's like some of these spirits don't even give you their names. They're just there. They're there as an identifiable presence, but they don't give you a particular name. And I'm okay with that. I don't have to have a Braxus Waddlecoddle, or any fancy thing, or Jim, or Joe, or Jill, or whatever. I don't have to have any of that. I don't need any of that. A few spirits over the years have given me a name, and some haven't. And I'm okay with that. I don't need that. I know their presence. I recognize their energy. I recognize their personality and their presence. And for me, that's enough.
Why do you suppose that is? Why do you suppose they don't? Or is it a human need that we have to need to associate ourselves with a label or a name?
Names with things. I think it is a human need. And a lot of the spirits that I've interacted with don't seem to have that as a need or as a priority.
Hmm.
And don't necessarily transmit a name to us in the way that we would associate naming each other and recognizing each other. And so that's been kind of a unique characteristic of the other side all these years. And like I say, for me, it's never been an issue. I don't have to say, oh, is this Jim or Jill or Oxyquaddle or whatever. I don't have that need. All I know is these guys speak to me in a voice that I can hear, understand, recognize. And if they tell me to do something with a sense of urgency, I do because they've saved my life literally on many occasions. I've learned to listen to their voices. I've learned to obey those voices. And for me, that's all I need.
Is the other part of it too, John, that a couple of these guys are ascended to some point? Maybe they've had many different identities and they don't necessarily are affiliated with one?
That could be. That could be. There's so many things that we don't know about the other side. We have this incomplete understanding. And I've been a professional psychic for over 50 years. I've studied the paranormal realm ever since I was 11 years old. I started doing extensive research, and I'm going to be 71 in March. And the more I've learned, the more questions I have. And I saw a meme the other day on Facebook that for me summed up everything. What we know is one drop of water. What we don't know is the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I feel about everything, and especially about the spiritual and the paranormal realms. We get a lot of answers. We get a lot of helpful things. Like in my book, 20 Ways to Increase Your Psychic Abilities, they gave me 20 techniques that anybody can use and make work to improve their lives, to change their conditions and to do things and so on and so forth. But we still have a lot of issues in the world. We still have a lot of health problems with our bodies. We still have wars. We still have problems with the planet. We don't solve everything, but we can solve some things. And in solving some of those things, we put more and more of the pieces of the puzzle together. And then that should be an impetus for us to try and learn more and more and to get as much light as we can and to put all this together in a meaningful, constructive way that we then are sending out more positive energy into the world, gathering more positive energy, working on more healing, working more on more love, working on more compassion and understanding. And I think that has to be the ultimate focus and the goal of all spiritual inquiry.
Amen to that. That kind of brings me around to one of the points you bring up in the book. I don't want to bring that kind of full circle, but to a different topic. And that is,
okay.
I want to bring it around to animals and your relationship with animals.
Yeah.
You brought up there's a story in the book about you and a tortoise. Oh, no, a tortoise, a turtle.
Oh yeah, the tortoise. Yeah, the gopher tortoise.
The gopher tortoise. Yeah. And I kind of drew a parallel in my own head. Our listeners of the show know about my relationship with my chipmunks out front.
Right.
And I have 5 trained chipmunks it's now up to 5 now, John. I'm collecting them like Pokemon out in my front yard. But they keep multiplying. But I have a relationship with my chipmunks similar that you have with your and birds now too. I now have birds coming to me and wanting to sit with me. And I have one bird named Tweety who was sitting at my feet all summer. And I just had a little dish of food, and much like this tortoise, Tweety was sitting at my feet and just chilling with me and eating black oil sunflower seeds all summer. Right. And just relaxing.
Yeah.
Which, to tell people a little bit about this tortoise that was hanging out with you.
Well, it was really weird, and I write about this in the book. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting in my office, and at the house we were living in at the time. And there's my dog barking in the background. I apologize.
That's okay.
The house we were in, I had a big plate glass window looking out my office into the backyard. And we had a large privacy fence, and I always kept the gates locked and everything. So I hear all this clattering on my lanai. And I'm looking out my window, and I hadn't seen anybody or anything come through the yard. And I'm like, what in the world is going on here? I knew the gates were locked. So then I get up and I go out of my office to go into the living room to look out onto the lanai, see what's going on. And I hear this knocking on the door. And I'm like, what in God's name? And I look around the corner, I look at the door. We had 2 glass doors going out into the backyard on the lanai. And I'm looking, and there's nobody there, but there's this knocking on the door. So I'm thinking, well, maybe it's a spirit or whatever. And I look down, and there's this little gopher tortoise. And he's reared up on the step. There was a step that came up to the doors before you came in the house. He's reared up on the step, and he's like clawing at the door. And every time he claws at the door, his shell bumps against the door and knocks on it like a knock, 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 knock. And I'm like, what in God's name? So I'm like, okay. And gopher tortoises in the wild are normally pretty skittish. I used to hike through the state parks here, and when you'd see them, they'd either freeze or they'd run for their burrows or whatever. Well, we had a large gopher tortoise that would dig under the fence and come into the yard and eat, and then he would leave. And so that's how this little guy was getting under. And this was a small one. And I thought, man, this is really crazy. So he was walking around on the lanai, knocking over the watering can and doing all this, making all that noise. Mm-hmm. So I waved at him through the window, and he stopped and just kind of looked at me, and I said, you want me to come outside with you? And he kind of backed down off the steps. So I opened the door, walked out, and stood out there with him. And he just stood looking up at me. And so I started talking to him, and he just kind of sat down and just sat there with me. And I thought, well, this is the wildest thing I've ever seen. So he sat there for a little while, and then he wandered off into the yard and got something to eat and then went on his way. And I thought, wow, what an incredible thing to have that type of a visit, to have this creature come to me and give me this kind of an experience. And I presumed it was like a once in a lifetime thing. And so the next day, I hear the knocking at the door again, the clattering around on the lanai, and I go out, and there he is again. And I'm like, holy cow. So I got my camera, took a picture of him, went inside and got a beer. And I said, okay, I'll just come out and sit with you a while. So I sat down in one of the chairs there on the lanai, and he walked over to within about a foot or so of me and plopped down and just sat there and looked at me. And we sat there and I talked to him for a while. And he got to the point that I could pet him. I could pick him up, put him in my lap. He wouldn't hiss. He wouldn't even draw his head in. He was perfectly fine. Now, this was not somebody's escape pet turtle. This was a wild gopher tortoise. And
Yeah.
this is why I was so freaked out. And he would do that. And then little babies, smaller than him, started to come and visit me. And they started coming up on the lanai. And I would go out and they would just all come and just sit by me and just sit there. And I would sit with them and talk to them. And I looked up online, what do turtle visitations mean? And turtle visitations are typically associated with good luck and spiritual enlightenment and protection and so on and so forth. So I thought, man, this is just incredible. This is just crazy. And then from there, I got to thinking about the food chain, and I elaborate on that a little bit in the book. And then I'm going to
Yes.
write at more length in a coming book about some things, some revelations that have come to me about the food chain. But I got to thinking about that, and I thought, this experience to me was this sacred moment in time and the spiritual revelation from this creature that to someone else would just be considered the potential for a good bowl of soup.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was like, and this got me to thinking about the dichotomies of things. But yeah, that was the gopher tortoise visit, and I plan to write in future books. I've had so many spiritual experiences and connections with animals that show that they're sentient, that show that they have emotions, that show they have feelings, and they have the ability to communicate. And I want to expand and go into that in future books because there is this great spiritual connection with animals that we can have and that we miss and that can really enrich our lives. And I want to get into in future books. I also want to write about we've had several animals that have spoken in English, and they have spoken in English, not in a like I love you, not in a difficult way to understand or in a way that you say, well, that really, it could be construed as that, but maybe it's really not. I mean, these animals have spoken English so clear that other that heard it, I'll give you an example. We had,
Hmm.
he's on the other side now, but we had this Chihuahua, little 10-pound Chihuahua. And when we would take him to the vet to get his nails trimmed, he would turn into Cujo.
Ooh.
And I was the only person that could hold him. It was like holding a whirling dervish, like the Tasmanian devil.
Hmm.
And he would claw me up and scratch me up and bite me up while the vet tech was trimming his nails. And he would growl and scream and bark and roar. And we would come out of the room, and the people out in the waiting room would go, that little dog made all that noise. I mean, it was that dramatic, right?
Uh-huh.
So, and it was the same vet tech, and the vet tech was very nice to him, very patient, very gentle with him, but he would always just go, bat crazy. And we were in there one time, and I was holding him, and we were trying to calm him down. He was exceptionally wild that day. And the vet grabbed one of his paws and was holding it before he kept trimming. And he looked at looked at the little dog and he said, "Just calm down. You're okay. You're fine." And the dog looked at him and went, "No, I'm not. As clear as that." And
Wow.
the vet tech's eyes got as big as saucers. And he looked up at us and he looked at the dog and he looked up at us, and we were like, "You heard it. You heard it. Just as clear as we
Whoa.
did." Yeah. And he said it, he didn't say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." He said, "No, I'm not." As clear as that. And, and we had heard him talk before, so we weren't as freaked out, but the vet tech nearly dropped his teeth. He was like, "Holy cow." So,
So
yeah,
how
we had heard him talk
how do
before
you
because,
explain that?
well, I don't. It's obviously that animals have some ability to communicate by language, and sometimes I don't know what the motive principle for that activation is, but we've had cats that talk clearly. Um, we've had these dogs that talk clearly. So it's really a startling thing. But once you experience it several times, you go, oh, this is kind of the norm, not a rare thing, but there's an ability out there that these critters have that under the right circumstances they can exercise. And like I say, I've heard cats clearly speak in English. The reason we weren't so surprised with the little dog, he'd talked before. One time I was out in the courtyard, and he was in my wife's lap, and she said, "Where's Daddy? Daddy's outside, didn't he?" She said, "What's Daddy doing out there?" And she said, "He goes, I don't know."
Wow.
And then one time he was up on the bed with us, and she was his favorite. Yeah, he tolerated me sometimes, but so we were on the bed and goofing around with him, and I said, "Hey, can Daddy have a sugar?" And he looked at me and went, "No," and turned around and walked off.
Wow.
So, again, we have this rich capability of experience with the spiritual realm that we haven't even begun to recognize or tap yet. And that's why I wanted to get into like the magic rock and relationship with nature and with things that we take for granted, don't even notice. And then all of a sudden we get the realization that, oh my God, these things are sentient as well, And as crazy as that sounds, back in the day, you used to have shamans and witch doctors and voodoo priests and psychics and so on and so forth that told you that things were sentient, that things had feelings, that things were alive, that the universe was connected. And then as that began to be poo-pooed and science came on up and people said, no, there's no evidence for that. You're a fruitcake, you're a crackpot, you're a nut. These things don't exist. These things can't be. Now, in this book and in later books, I have provided solid scientific quotes from the mainstream science community that says trees have memory of their lives. They remember events that have happened to them in their lives. They have intelligence. They have memory. And then other scientists have said plants have a communication system so that one side of the garden patch knows what's going on the other side of the garden patch. And they eavesdrop and they listen to things and they send signals back and forth.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, John, but one of the most disturbing things I read within the last 2 years was a news story that said that plants feel pain and they believe that they scream when they're cut. Yeah, so when you go and mow your grass, you could probably hear thousands of blades of grass scream.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So science is now proving that, yes, everything is alive, everything is sentient, everything does feel, and so on and so forth. And we used to say that everything was connected in the universe, that we weren't necessarily all one, but we're all connected. And then that began to be poo-pooed, no tree hugger hippie nonsense and psychic mumbo jumbo. And so now, what are physicists proving? Physicists are proving that you can conduct an experiment in the U.S. and the control target in Switzerland experiences the same thing as what's going on in the U.S. So we are all connected. And so I'm trying to get people to understand through these writings that it's not mumbo jumbo nonsense, that this is the reality of the world that we live in. And we need to wake up to that and appreciate that and understand that more. And you don't have to go through any super radical change in the way you live, because in a way that's kind of impossible, because you're not going to stop cutting your grass,
right?
But you can be more respectful of things and you can be more understanding of things and you can try and be more compassionate, be more communicative, and so on and so forth. So that's the focus of all my spiritual writings, is to get people to understand this is not an anomaly. This is the norm for this planet. And if you take the time to try and connect, the other side will reach out to you and you can begin to learn and experience these things for yourself. So you don't have to say, yeah, that John, he's a good storyteller, all right, but God, what a nut. None of these things can happen. None of this can be real. If you take the time to reach out, you'll experience it for yourself. Then you'll know that it's real because you'll be experiencing it on the physical realm.
Well, I can attest exactly to what you're saying. I mean, even this past summer, just sitting on my porch, this past spring, summer, fall, sitting on my porch, quieting down and just relaxing and becoming kind of one with nature, even just the nature in my front yard, it came to me.
Exactly.
I didn't have to do anything. It came to me.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the other side is more willing to reach out to us than we think that it is. And I think that one thing that the skeptics always bandy about is that, well, you know, I sit down, meditated, nothing happened. There's not anything to any of it. Or I wanted this to occur and nothing happened. If you're psychic, why haven't you won the lottery and blah, blah, blah. So the skeptics are always wanting to come and put a quarter in the machine and punch a button and get the prize. And the other side doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
You know, God, I wish it did, but it doesn't work like that. The other side, to interact with the other side, you develop a relationship. And it's not a, here I am again, give me this. Okay, here I am again, give me that. Okay, it's been another day. I'm here again. Now I need this. Now I need that. Give me this. Show me that. Do this. Do that. The other side isn't there for us to order around and fulfill our every desire. It just doesn't work like that. You know, I wish to God that it did, but it doesn't. And I think we have to understand that when we approach the other side, we need to approach it with understanding, with compassion, with respect, and to realize that we're developing a two-way relationship. Then there's give and take there.
With that in mind, I have to ask you this ridiculous question. What do you think of abundance ministries?
Oh, Lord. I've hated abundance ministries for decades. You know, they take all kinds of things out of context and they tell you, you know, you can't outgive God. And you know, for every $10 you give, God's going to reward you tenfold and all this kind of nonsense. And that's not the case. You know, there have been documented cases of poor widowed women sending in their Social Security check for the month, so God will really bless them, and then they have no way to pay their bills, and they have no food, and they have to rely on somebody to come and bail them out. You know, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
The abundance ministries are frauds, and the reason that the guy can stand up there in his $5,000 suit and in his mega church and drive his Rolls Royce and fly all over on his private jet and tell you that God has blessed him, the only way that works is because you've given him all your friggin' money.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
God hasn't blessed him. You've blessed him. You've given him all the bucks, and he's taking the bucks and is living like a king while you're sending in, you know, X amount of months out of your Social Security retirement check, hoping, isn't God good? Oh, God's going to bless me for this. And you never put pencil to paper and see that your bottom line's going down, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hate these abundance ministries as much as I hate the phony psychics and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell you what, we're going to take a break here, John. When we come back, I want to get into something else that may get under your craw a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the people who believe that the UFOs are just here to help us.
Oh boy, that's a good one.
I want to stir you up a little bit as far as that goes. Before we do go to break, though, John, I have a little. If you're watching on video, I have a little picture I want to show you here. That's my buddy.
One of your little characters.
That's one of my little characters sitting on the chair right across from me on the porch.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love it. That's great.
Just sitting there as I'm having my morning coffee. So
that's great. I love that.
Just sitting there and having a little sit down with me. So. So yeah, that just so people, if you're watching on video, if you're watching on YouTube on our Darkness Radio, it's the original Darkness Radio, by the way, on YouTube if you're watching, or you can hook up by going to darknessradioshow.com, and it's attached right to the audio file of this show. You can actually see John and I talking back and forth as well. You'll see a little picture of Chip there sitting on the chair and just having a little sit down with me as well. So when we come back, we'll talk with John about those pesky UFOs and UAPs and why maybe they're not as intelligent as you may think, and why people maybe give them a little bit too much credit than maybe we should. That's coming up after the break. The name of the book is a good one, folks. The Crying Tree and the Magic Rock. And we have a link to it in the description of this program. While we're out at break, I want you to go and click on that link. Go get a copy for yourself. When we come back, more with our guest, John Russell, right after this on the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guest is John Russell. I'll get his name right. The book is a great one. It's called The Crying Tree and the Magic Rock. It is available right now. We have a link in the description of this program. I highly encourage you to go out and get it. What a great book. Before we get to those pesky UFOs and UAPs, I do want to end things with one more animal story. You had mentioned Gizmo. And Gizmo makes a return. See what I did there? It's part of the name of the chapter. Yep. Gizmo makes a return in this book. Gizmo, of course, is one of your more favorite animals. Yep. I don't want to spoil the entire story of how Gizmo makes the return, but Gizmo has a way of popping back up in your life from time to time, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And I tell people that when Gizmo has returned in the flesh twice. And I tell people that our animals are, obviously their souls, spirits live on, their personalities live on, but there are more occasions than just mine where people have experienced animals returning in the flesh to visit before they disappear again. And that should get everybody that's an animal lover hope that, their souls live on. We get to be reunited with them, get to see them again. But for me, I think with Gizmo returning periodically throughout my life, it's so heartwarming because it's like, hey, John, I remember you. I still love you. I'm showing you I'm still here. I'm still around. I'm okay. And I'm waiting for you. I'm hanging around. We're going to see each other again someday. And so for me, that's one of the most beautiful things there is.
So explain to me, because I wasn't lost reading it, but do you believe that it's a walk-in on a current animal that's living, or do you believe that Gizmo's reincarnated?
Oh, I believe that it's Gizmo in the flesh. I believe that
Really?
He's able to somehow come back in the flesh and manifest and then disappear to the other side again and say, okay, I'll see you again.
Wow. See, I know of one person in particular that would absolutely love to see his animal again in the flesh one more time. I know of a lot of people that would love that, but I know a lot of animal owners and animal lovers that say, once they're gone, I grieve them so hard, they have to be gone, and they hang on to that memory.
Yeah.
I have to ask you this question here, John. The harder we hang on to them, are we not going to see them again? Is there a point where it's healthy just to let go and let God and hope that maybe one day they will make that appearance like Gizmo made for you?
I think so. It's like, you want to hold on to the fond memory of them, absolutely. But at some point, and I don't think our hard grieving and our yearning for them, I don't think that restricts them in any way on the other side. I don't think it hinders them in any way on the other side. It's just something that it may hinder us. It may keep us from moving forward and moving on. And I like there's another thing I saw on Facebook I really loved where it showed the dog on the other side and the grieving owner, and it said, something to the effect of, I know you miss me, and I know you love me, and I know you said you could never replace me, but please, there are other dogs out there that need you and that need your love. Go and adopt them. I'll still be here for you on the other side, but, get somebody else and love them too. And I think that's one of the greatest things we can do as pet owners is when we lose a pet, after the appropriate grieving time, bring another one into our lives to love. And as a buddy of mine said, he said, God, they're so wonderful in our lives and so hard when they pass because they have so little time with us. Yeah. And it is difficult, but that's the wonderful part of opening up our heart, because there are so many animals out there in need of adoption. And if you can open up your heart to another one, give it a loving home, and allow that bond of love to occur with that new animal, you've done a great service.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to switch up topics here from animals that need a loving home to some pesky UAPs and UFOs that may need a loving home. It seems like they're breaking into your home at night and at least trying to probe you. I know that much.
Exactly.
there you have a very interesting chapter in the book, a refreshing one at that, because you may have some critics out there that say, well, John, you've had a lot of experiences and it seems like maybe one too many experiences that I don't know that I believe it, but then you come and you hit them with a skeptical point of view right upside the head, John, which is very refreshing.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your stance on UFOs and UAPs and why it's so skeptical, even though you've had experiences.
I've had tons of experiences and I've had interactions with these craft. I've seen them in broad daylight with witnesses. So I know they're real. I know they're physical craft. My problem with these craft, and I go through some of these things in the book, my main issue with these craft is we have a lot of needs here on this planet. We have needs for better understanding, better ways to exhibit compassion. We need to understand each other better. We need to overcome our tribalism. We have hideous health issues on this planet. We have little kids in St. Jude Children's Hospital riddled with cancer. We have environmental concerns that are not just of our making. I mean, the earth is a difficult place to eke out a living, and the earth does a lot of things, a lot of upheavals in and of itself that make it very difficult to live here. So we have lots of issues. We have lots of problems on this planet. It's a very difficult place to live. And here supposedly are these vastly superior intelligent beings that have mastered long distance space travel, that have understand physics better than we do, because everything that we know about physics, they break the laws of. And supposedly, these beings can bring enlightenment and healing and help, and there are space brothers, and they're here to watch over us, and they're here to help us. Well, if they are, they're sure doing a damn funny job of it.
Right.
Because we're not getting any better, we're getting worse. We haven't ushered in any new ages of enlightenment. We haven't, we've got more wars, more famine, more plagues, more difficulties on this planet than we ever have. It just keeps growing, keeps growing, keeps growing. People are more hostile and uncivil towards each other now. And so, the argument against the UFO brothers breaking into this paradigm and helping us and bringing peace and helping us sort out our technology and helping us sort out our spiritual understanding and or whatever. The argument against that, and I address this in the book, and to me it's always been so stupid. One of the main arguments against that is that they're operating from the Prime Directive. And the Prime Directive, if you watched Star Trek, the Prime Directive was to observe but not to interfere. That if you brought in a superior way of life and technology and all of these things to a race, how disruptive it would be. Well, people quote the aliens as operating from the position of the Prime Directive. Now, this pisses me off no end, because the Prime Directive doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It was written in a science fiction show.
Right.
It is a precept designed from a science fiction show. The Prime Directive does not exist in real life. It's from a movie. It's from a TV series. It doesn't exist, okay? Now, even if it did exist, even if the Prime Directive did exist, if the aliens had superior technology that will enable us to get all the little kids out of St. Jude's, get them cured, and send them home to their families, would that disrupt your life in a horrible way? Would that be negative? Would that be hostile? Would that be upsetting? No, that would be cause for joyous celebration. Mm-hmm. If the aliens could come and say, hey guys, all of this radioactive waste that you stored in various places around the world, where the land and the water and the environment there, and I've done research on this is no exaggeration, will be contaminated for a minimum of 10,000 years. Wouldn't you like to be able to clean that up and make that all go away and restore the land to use? Would that be so upsetting that we couldn't deal with it or handle it? Would that disrupt our lives? No, that would enhance our lives, make life on Earth so much better. So there's no reason, if you have these capabilities, not to bring those into us and to help us. And, the argument is always, and Stephen Hawking, made this argument. He said, our encounter with aliens could be much like it was when Columbus discovered the New World, quote unquote. He didn't discover anything, it was always there. But he said that didn't go well for the natives and, probably wouldn't go well for us. So that was Stephen Hawking thinking. Well, that could be, but we have to make the assumption, and it is only an assumption because we don't know. We can make the extrapolation that just like here on Earth, there's good people and there's bad people. We have to assume that there could be good aliens and bad aliens. The problem I have is, okay, if there are good aliens, why aren't they intervening? Why aren't they doing something? It's this big mystery that I can't fathom. We know these things are intelligently controlled. We have whistleblowers coming out now saying, not only have we retrieved alien craft, we've retrieved alien biologics. We have alien bodies. Okay. So we know there are physical beings. We know they're sentient. We know these things are not ours or any other governments or whatever. So they're here. They're roaming around at will. They're doing what they want to at will. If they have these capabilities to help us, why don't they? They haven't. And that's one thing that bothers me no end is what is the motive? Why are they here? Why do they operate with this impunity? And I always go back to somebody in our government has to know. With all of our vast intelligence gathering resources and all of our capabilities, somebody has to know. There has to be some knowledge there. There has to be something there. I remember a long time ago, one of the excuses given, and fairly recently, one of the excuses given was we just don't have the capability to capture these things on film or video or radar or whatever. We don't have the ability to grasp that image in a way that we can analyze it and understand it, which is total BS because decades ago, I watched a documentary, and they had former heads of the CIA come on, and each one was interviewed and talked about their time in the CIA and talked about what they did and talked about the technology and so on and so forth. So one of the directors came on, and he said, he was talking about the SR-71 Blackbird, which was our premier spy plane. Now, younger people aren't going to know this. Go Google it. The SR-71 flew so high, it flew in subspace, and it flew, thousands of miles an hour, and nothing could catch it, nothing could shoot it down. And he said, now this is the director of the CIA speaking. This was on a documentary I saw with my own eyes. He said that when the SR-71 was flying over in subspace at speed, if you put a golf ball over here and a golf ball over here 2 feet apart on a putting green, that when the Blackbird flew over and took a picture and you developed the picture, you could clearly read which one was the Titleist and which one was the McGregor. And he said, that's decades old technology. Just imagine what we can do now.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's a former CIA director saying that. Okay. And that was decades ago. I saw this documentary. So don't tell me we don't have the optics to grab these things or the ability to analyze these things and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Now, somebody in the government, we have Stargate, our remote viewing program. That's beyond dispute. That's acknowledged as fact. It was real. It's there. We've had all these things we've done psychically. We've had all these things we've done paranormally in the government. We've had all these things we've done research-wise, so on and so forth. You cannot tell me that somebody somewhere in the depths of our government doesn't know what these things are, what their motive is, and what's going on. It's just incomprehensible that that's the case. So that brings us to the twofold question. Why don't they make contact if they're beneficial? They want to help us. And what's our government withholding from us? Why won't they give us disclosure and tell us the focus, intent, and purpose of these things? And you look at what they're doing, and it doesn't make any sense. Someone pointed out that they keep doing cattle abductions, cattle mutilations, and they've done this for decades. Now, if you haven't learned everything that you needed to know by dissecting a cow in a year's time over and over and over again, something's wrong. Why are you still doing it? Right. 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, 50 years later. Why are you still doing these things? It doesn't make any sense. What's the reason? What's the rationale? It's like what more could you have to learn, or what more need would you have? It's just crazy. It's just insane. So they do these weird things that don't make any sense, and they keep repeating them. And then they abduct people. Abducting a person against their will, that's not an act of kindness. That's not an act of goodness. That's hideous. And then you probe them with these painful experiments, and you take them back, and you got all these resultant problems from this. That's not an issue of kindness. And then people say, well, they're here to watch over us, make sure that we don't destroy ourselves. Well, they're doing a really, really lousy job there. And as far as our nuclear capabilities, they say, and it's documented now. This is beyond conjecture or beyond speculation. It's documented that in at least 2 cases here in the U.S., and I believe a case in Ukraine or Russia, and there may be others, but I'm aware of at least those 3, that people in the military and people in Congress have acknowledged the fact UFOs have hovered over our military bases and taken our nuclear missiles offline.
Mm-hmm.
They've literally shut them down. I mean, powerless. You could launch them if you wanted to. And then when the craft left, or right before they left, the missiles would come back online. So they're saying the proponents of the UFOs, the Space Brothers, they're saying, see, they've come to say, look, stop your madness, shut down your nuclear weapons, and blah, blah, blah. That's why they're here. They're giving us that message of world peace and to disarm ourselves. That's the biggest BS I've ever heard in my life. We've been doing nuclear testing for decades. And with the first test at Trinity, and I write about this in the book, the first test at Trinity, if the UFO brothers wanted to step in and say, hey, you guys are fixing to destroy yourself, they've had decades to do that, and they have not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what's seldom known about some of these instances where they've shut off the nuclear missiles, in a couple of cases when the missiles came back online, some were in launch mode and had to be physically taken out of launch mode to keep them from going off. So if they're the all-knowing, all-loving Space Brothers, either they screwed up big time or they were trying to start some crap. One of the two. It's like they're not as perfect as we give them credit for, or else they were trying to start something. So there's all of these problems, all these dichotomies with these theories of the benevolent Space Brothers and all this and all that. Benevolence doesn't act that way, and compassion doesn't act that way.
If you want one more bee for your bonnet here, John,
bring it.
There was something that President Trump announced this past week that I think it set off alarms. And I like connecting little dots every once in a while, and I like stirring up conspiracy theorists even more. Yeah. And you just mentioned one keyword, one buzzword, which should set off alarm bells to anybody who's a conspiracy theorist. And that is the new AI project that the U.S. government is getting involved in. He announced that the U.S. government is pouring $500 billion into AI. That the government is investing in it. But do you know what the project name is?
No.
Stargate.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's a little scary.
Isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Now, this is where the antenna go up, because if you believe anything that any conspiracy theorist would tell you, it's that, well, we're co-opting alien tech, or we're taking alien tech for ourselves, and we're developing it, and that's where things like your iPhone come from, and that's where all this stuff is coming from.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to believe the rumors, that supposedly is where we're getting AI from, but why are we taking and throwing $500 billion of government money into AI when supposedly the government's a nonprofit organization?
Right.
And then we're naming it Stargate?
I know.
Does that tell you that maybe we have alien tech and we're just going to gin it up with $500 billion of U.S. money?
It's pretty scary. And I write about AI in this book. And my concern with AI, there's 2 things that really, really scare me about AI. One is that, and you can look this up online, the main creator or influencer in AI, they call him the godfather of AI, and I don't even recall his name right now.
Alan
um, the recent
Okay.
guy that's the big honcho in AI, and they call him the godfather of AI. And he says, I saw in a recent interview here a year or so back, something like that. He said, now this is the guy that's the big AI guy now, and he said, we need to put the brakes on this thing
Hmm.
right now.
Hmm.
We need to stop this right now. He said it's way out of control. We don't have enough safeguards in place. We don't know where it's going. We need to stop it right now. We need to put the brakes on, back up, and reassess things. So this is the guy that's like the biggest current guy in the know about AI saying, hey, we need to stop this stuff. I mean, one of the biggest developers in AI. This is the guy that knows all this. And he's like, we need to stop. We need to put the brakes on this. The thing that scares me, the second thing that scares me is we don't know what machine intelligence is going to do. We've had enough interaction with dogs and cats and snakes and birds and dolphins and bears and everything else to make reasoned guesses about behavior, to develop interaction. Some species become pets. Some species, like your friends, the birds and the little chipmunks and things, and they come, they sit with you, and you develop that relationship. What's it going to be with machine intelligence? It's not natural intelligence. It's not human intelligence. It's a different type of intelligence. And it's intelligence that is it going to show compassion? Is it going to care only for itself? Is it going to regard us with a neutral curiosity? Is it going to regard us with hostility? Are we going to become some kind of experiment? We don't know. We don't know what this thing's going to do.
Well, we have two indicators from two military tests when they tried to arm AI inside different war games when they were doing AI guided military flights or
Right.
simulated flights and inside war games, and each time the AI chose to exterminate humanity or
Yeah.
exterminate human targets
Right.
because
Right.
it deemed the human targets to be too dangerous.
Yeah. And also you know, AI is susceptible to being controlled by the spiritual realm. If spirits can slam doors shut, and if spirits can move things, and if spirits can physically interact with our physical world, then they can certainly manipulate AI. They may already even be doing so, and who knows to what end. I'm not saying that there's a demon behind every bush and not even going there. We've discussed that before, but there may be um, spirits in the spiritual realm that say, "Hey, look at this. Let's see what I can do with this," and manipulate AI that way. An interesting thing happened, and I write about this in the book. Morgan Spurlock, who did the documentaries, he did a documentary on robotics and AI, and one of the most chilling things was this company had developed these little tiny small robots, just a few inches high, and they were self-powered, and they programmed them to do certain tasks and to kind of learn some basic things and to do certain things. So the little robots had a docking station where they could recharge. And they would go to the docking station, recharge, and they'd go out and do their little tasks and everything. And they observed that without any additional programming, without any glitches or errors in the software to account for it, some of the robots went and tried to hog the power station and get all the power from themselves and keep the other robots from charging.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So talk about the ghost in the machine. And they were like, where did this behavior come from? What's happening here? And then of
Right.
course you've got the Alexa chatbot that who was it told the kid to kill her step parents or whatever it was, those types of things. And they're like, where did this come from? This has gone off the rails. So there's vast potential for abuse here. There's vast potential for danger here. And our big problem, if the listeners will go to Google and Google Boston Dynamics robots and look at what Boston Dynamics has produced. They have freestanding humanoid adult-sized robots that can do backflips, that can jump up on a box, that can do this, do that, blah, 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 blah. And now Elon Musk has a robot I saw,
Yep.
And it not only has AI, but it has self-learning AI. With the Boston Dynamics robots up to this point, everything they've done, they've had to go, okay, this gyroscope needs to be adjusted so the robot balances, or we need to change this programming so it understands, grab the box and lift it up and don't drop it or whatever. So basically, that's all been human-induced. Now, Elon Musk has a robot that is self-learning and self-teaching. And it was very chilling watching it because I watched a video of it on YouTube, and the robot was tasked with taking blocks and moving them from one box to another, from one and putting them in the box or whatever. So the robot is doing that, and he grabs the block and he puts it over here, and he grabs the block and he puts it over here. And the next block he grabs, when he sets it down, it goes off kilter. It goes a little wonker jawed. And as he's reaching back for the next block, he stops. He looks over at the block. He goes back over and writes it and sets it correctly, and then goes back for the next block. Now, that's pretty friggin' scary. So you have all these things. So all these robots, and we build them much, much stronger than we are, and that's going to be our downfall, like I point out in the book.
Mm-hmm.
There's, on one of the Boston Dynamics robots, they do this thing where they keep the robot goes to the door and he tries to open the door. And there's a guy standing there with a stick and he slams the door shut. And the robot goes over and he grabs the door and he opens it. The guy slams the door shut. And so it's a repetitive task, to teach the robot, you got to keep going, you got to keep trying.
Yep.
What happens when the singularity occurs and the robot all of a sudden is like, damn it to hell, and turns around and whacks the guy. Get away from me. I'm trying to open this door, So there's potential for all kinds of downfall here. There's potential for all kinds of problems. But I thought it was very interesting to realize that there can definitely be a spiritual manipulation component to this as well. So we have a lot to worry about.
When you mention AI being manipulated by spirits, the first thing I think of is when you talk about the use even of Chat GPT, right, and building some sort of a spirit box involving Chat GPT, or something where you could tell a spirit, well, if you want to interact or interface, just simply, right, put yourself in front of this, and it would be motion sensor detecting, right, where right, all you would have to do is, even if it were a keyboard or something, yeah, just put your fingers on this virtual keyboard and type right out what it is you want, what message you want, and ChatGPT can interface with you, or right, something to that effect, or even all you have to do is put your ghost hand on it, and you can interact within, and ChatGPT can translate what it is that you want to say to us.
Right. Right.
The only problem with that is, as we've seen, ChatGPT gets a mind of its own.
Yes.
After a while. And who's to say that their words don't get twisted?
Right. That's it. That's the problem. And so, that's why I always tell people that rely solely on devices in paranormal investigations. I say, look, you're getting a demonstration. You're not getting a communication. And even if you believe you're getting a communication, just like you pointed out, it may not be an accurate communication. It may not be a word for word communication. And that's why I very seldom rely on any of those devices when I've done anything, because I have two-way real-time conversations with the spirits in my head. And I know it doesn't get garbled. I know if they're telling me something or asking me something or showing me something, I'm getting it straight from them and not through any device or through anything that's susceptible to being manipulated. So, yeah, we've got such a long way to go with all this.
Yeah. Yeah, in that it can be a little scary. I'll tell you what, we're running a little short on time, but I do want to get just kind of an old-fashioned little creepy story from you before we leave people today. There's one in particular that to me was absolutely a creep out type story, and it has to do with a popular holiday.
Cinco de Mayo. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You know the one I'm talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about the one that revolves around Cinco de Mayo, John?
Yeah, that was just a mind-blowing story for me. And as many things as I've experienced, it blew my hair back when I heard this. And like I say, the guy that told this to me, my friend, he was absolutely reliable, absolutely rock solid. His family was stable, not given to hyperbole or to fantasy or to anything like this. And the story was, you can read the whole complete thing in the book, but I'll go ahead and tell you the salient part of the story. We had a Mexican nightclub there where I grew up, and long story short, one night we were sitting there, my mother and I were sitting there in our living room with the windows open when we heard this Mexican music come wafting through the air, and it would rise and fall in volume and rise and fall in volume. And finally, we figured out that it was coming from this Mexican nightclub that was probably at least a mile away. And when the wind conditions were just right and the atmospheric conditions were just right, you could hear the music from this nightclub. So I was telling my friend, my best friend in the entire world, who was Mexican, I was telling him the story about we'd sit there and listen to this music coming from that Mexican nightclub. And we both knew the name of the nightclub. I don't recall it right now, but we both knew the name of the nightclub. And he got this funny look on his face. And he said, I have to tell you the story about that nightclub. I said, okay. And he said, I don't recall. And I say this in the book, I don't recall. It was either his mother or some other relatives, or an aunt, or his mother and an aunt. But anyway, some of his relatives were there. And as the evening wore on, they said this incredibly handsome man came in, dressed to the nines. Everybody was like, who the heck is this? And of course, all the men are immediately jealous and blowing up. And the women are like, wow, look at this guy, look at this guy. Because they said he was just incredibly handsome, just unbelievably handsome. And just dressed this super expensive, gorgeous suit. But they said the weird thing was, and everybody noticed this almost immediately, the pants legs were so long that they drug the ground over his shoes. And they were like, what in the world? Here's this incredibly handsome guy. He's got that obviously expensive tailored suit. And why are the pants dragging the floor? So as the night wears on, he's dancing with all the women and drinking and carrying on. And everybody's just, oh, wow, just overawed with this guy. And he sits down with one of the women at a table. And they're sitting there laughing and talking, and he crosses his leg, and he crosses his leg a little too fast and a little too vigorously. And when he does, it flipped the pants leg up, exposing one of his hooves.
No.
And everybody in there was like, ah! And then people started screaming, jumping up, overturning tables, and more people are looking, and he realizes his mistake, and he jumps up, runs out into the darkness, and vanishes. And so my friend tells me that absolutely in all seriousness. And I'm like, we have to go to this club and we have to conduct an investigation. We have to see if we can conjure this guy and bring him back. He's like, nope, no way, no how, not ever setting foot in there again. You can't, nope. So the immediate assumption is everybody was dancing with the devil, that it was the devil. But, there's a lot of references to horned beings in literature, and they're usually like nature spirits or forest spirits, forest gods, or whatever. And so not necessarily the devil, but boy, it made for one heck of a story. And like I say, 100% true. My buddy was absolutely, totally serious when he told me that. And they were so scared of the club, they never went there again.
Can you imagine if you're the woman who's dancing with him and you're being charmed by him and you're this close to going home with him?
Yeah.
Oh. Man, telling you. Yeah, reading that story, I just I wasn't catching on the long pant leg until the minute he flipped it up, and I went, whoa,
whoa,
whoa.
Yeah, that was pretty much everybody's reaction in the club, from what I understand. It was like, holy cow, did you see this?
Yeah, whoa. Yeah, I don't know what you do at that point, especially when he runs off.
Disappeared into the night, just vanished.
I don't know if I ever go back.
Yeah. Well, me, I would. I'd have to go say, hey, I got to see this guy. Let's conjure this guy up. It's like,
But do you think that he actually goes back in the same guise? That's the thing. Does he
well, that's it.
actually,
Yeah, he might come back some other way as in some other
right,
form. So,
right,
you don't know. All of these beings have this ability to take all these different forms and
right.
appearances. So you never know with whom or with what you're interacting. It's like I write in one of my books about when I was out on my motorcycle. I've been a biker since I was 15. And on my current bike, I've got almost 114,000 miles on just this bike alone. So lots of time on the road, and I'm always hyper aware of everything that's around me, and always looking in my rearview mirrors and everything else. And I was out on this lonely back road here in Florida, one of my absolute favorite rides, and I know all the places like the back of my hand. And I was coming up on this turnoff, and just habitually. It was a T-bone road. It was just one road coming into the road from over here that I turned off on. And just habitually, when I slow down, I always check my mirrors and I always look left and right, even if there's not any traffic or a road there or anything. I just look into people's yards, make sure no dog or a deer or something's running out to hit me or whatever. So I'm always looking all the way around. So I had looked, I made my turn, and the second I made my turn, I looked back in my rearview mirror. I always just make a habit to check after I turn. And over there on the side of the road where I had just turned from, that I knew there was nothing there because I just looked. There was this big black, like an obelisk, like this big, like in 2001, The Space Odyssey. There was this big, tall
Really?
black thing, maybe like 10, 12 feet tall, and solid black, just standing there. And I immediately got this awareness from it that it was sentient, that it was watching me, and that it wanted me to know that it was there, and that it was just kind of like, hey, we just kind of keep an eye on you out here. And I was like, holy God. And so I was about to turn around and go back. I want to see this thing, other than in my rearview mirror. And all of a sudden, about this time, there's a car coming the other way. It's a little narrow 2-lane road, and I can't get turned around. I got to wait for this car to go past, and it's poking, poking, poking. By the time it gets turned around, I look back, whatever it was had vanished. So we see all kinds of things and all kinds of guises, all kinds of appearances, and so on and so forth. So it's a pretty mysterious and wonderful world.
That's a great way to end it. It's a pretty mysterious and wonderful world indeed. The name of the book, and it's available right now, folks. We have a link in the description of this program. It's called The Crying Tree and the Magic Rock, and I encourage you to pick up a copy.
Thank you.
Not only are there some great stories in there, John, but there's some fascinating opinions that you've thrown in there as well that you back up with facts. So we want to put that in there as well, that people should go check that as well. Man, another home run, John. That's all I.
Oh,
That's all I
bless
can
your
say.
heart. Thank you. I appreciate it. And got a new one coming out this year,
Oh,
and
okay.
more true paranormal stories. This one's called The Cansack Ghost, and more incredible stories. And in this one, I write about skeptics and go on at length about James Randi, and
Really?
yeah, a lot of neat stuff coming. So that'll be out hopefully around the end of summer this year.
All right. Well, we'll have to have you back then. We'll talk
Absolutely, absolutely.
because we've had Randy on the program a couple of times when he was with us. So
Oh, amazing, amazing. Well, I've got a good Randy
yeah.
story in the book.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, before we leave people today, when he had his thing with Lou Gentili, we had the two of them face off against each other here on this program.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
one of the only times the two of them actually argued with each other was on this program, back and forth
Oh,
on
excuse me. I'm sorry.
sure on a phone line between the
Oh,
two
that's
of them,
incredible.
and
That's incredible.
it was about that $1 million challenge,
Yeah, yeah.
which
Well, I write at length about that in the book. I write at length about Randy and about the challenge. And I won't spoil it, but there was a radio show that I was on when we were living in New York.
Mhm.
A guy called me one day and he said, you'll never guess who I'm going to have on the show. And excuse me,
Mhm.
allergy season is just tearing me
Yeah,
up here.
yeah.
But he told me, he said, Randy. And I said, the amazing Randy, James Randy? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, can you be on the show to give him a run for his money? And I was like, oh God, let me check my schedule. There was no way I could move anything around to be on the show. So he said, well, give me some questions to ask him. And so I did. And so all the outcome of that is in the book that's coming up, The CanSat Ghost. So
Okay.
that'll be an interesting read for people.
Most definitely. Most definitely. We'll look forward to that as well. But again, the name of this book that you want to go pick up right now, and again, there's a link in the description of this program, The Crying Tree and the Magic Rock. So go get that in the description of this program. John Russell, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Tim, thank you. Thank you to all the listeners. Appreciate it. And I'll see you again before long.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Folks, I want to remind you, check out darknessradioshow.com, the events page that's there. Check out the store that's there. Also, want to remind you to check out the Apple app. If you haven't updated the Apple app lately, do so. If you happen to offload the Apple app because there's a little bit of a lag there, pick it back up again. Go to the Apple store, pick it back up again. Do that as well. So in the meantime, have a great weekend. Go be a light in someone's darkness this weekend. We encourage you to do so. Go help out a neighbor, a friend, whatever. Hey, there's snow down south right now. Go help somebody out of the snow this weekend. Don't wait for it to melt. Take and be proactive. Go help somebody this weekend. Again, go be a light in someone's darkness. We'll see you next week for another great week and the best of paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio.